So, are there home bases in what? Communication? That's the title of this video. We're actually going to make this a Human Game Console podcast, episode number 0004. And we're going to make this for another weekend that I'm, still working on, literally. But, literally working on towards things and also working in general. But, yeah, good morning, guys. I'm going to talk about a little bit of a weird idea that I connected before with my other channels. I talked about the home base in terms of life and life philosophy and why people don't have to feel stasis for the right reasons. But also, we're going to attach it to communication, which not just from whatever the home base philosophy is about, but the communication as part of the human game, which is what this podcast is about. So, why isn't there, if there is a human game communication that implies or even already default a given has home bases, what are they and how do we recognize them and how we make the most of them and whatever else? I think there are a few home bases, and before I even get into that, the home base I mentioned before on those channels, it was mostly about feeling a proper stasis, like a integral stasis for life to not have to be in a rush or not have to be developing or even make progress, even for better or worse, or bad progress, or what that's supposed to mean. Home base was basically feeling like you had a structure in life where you didn't have to feel bad about not improving things, but at the same time, if you so chose to improve things, you would earn and deserve it to be able to have that home base, whether it was possible or not in the reality. Home base was basically you don't have to worry about having something to prove, having to be about the results. I got in that case a lot of times, and having to make sure that even if you didn't feel comfortable or fit in easily, and I mentioned this before about the discomfort thing, that was the last podcast episode, why would you avoid the discomfort that feels you? So I forgot to mention that a little bit in 2 minutes, but there's just 2 minutes already, so we're still going to get a little further. But basically that's home base. If that doesn't explain enough right now, I can explain more. I have time, I feel good about it. But communication, on the other hand, that's the human game effort of socializing with 8 billion people on the planet, whether you like it or not. And you don't necessarily need other people. I mean, teamwork's a thing, negotiation's a thing. You only need yourself, and that's not even just an anarchist perspective. It's literally like you don't socially and emotionally you don't need anyone but yourself. Even if you are the person who I say I am, which is an extrovert who travels a lot and socializes, philosophizes, who doesn't necessarily need other people, but I would choose them and prefer them because that's the kind of happy person I want to be. I want to be someone who can choose them and not need them, even if I know that things don't go always down to proper forms of conflict resolution and all that. So communication is important, even if you don't want to be with other people, even if you just want to be able to communicate with yourself, it's important. So it's a hard thing to do, especially if you're a philosopher like me who doesn't see communication the same way as other people sometimes. But there you go. So with human game and communication, with home bases and communication, what kinds exist? I think there's a few that I can mention right now. If those you caught on, if it's possible to, with how I communicate. One possible home base with communication is an argument. People who have defined arguments differently, they say what is an emotional argument, what's a topic-focused argument, etc., etc. There's a philosophy I had, which was that you don't need an argument in order to communicate an idea. And that was a bit of its own paradox, dilemma, controversy, whatever you call it, conspiracy. You don't necessarily, for me, it felt like as if, even if I'm wrong about this, that you don't need an argument to express an idea. In some extreme cases, even if they're extreme, you don't even need to have an idea that you own or you believe to express it and promote it. You can promote your friends' ideas, obviously, but promoting an idea that you don't even agree with, that might seem asinine to some, but for the most part, you don't necessarily need an argument in order to have an idea. And that sounds crazy if you know what it would have been implied at that point to be, but hear me out. It's like the home base in an argument. The home base that does not exist apparent to an outlet of an argument is that you don't feel a certain stasis or structure with an argument because it's focused on a compass direction. Okay, it's got a movement and a progress of something that it's trying to attain and intends to resolve a problem solve something, have some intended worldly result. I'm sorry I keep bantering on that, but it's like that thing. You know. YK. It's for real. There's that's the idea of an argument being home based for communication. With communication in mind, actually, I'd say that people who have had to express a topic of focus to explain their communication, that's a lot of what makes communication even worthwhile, is to actually know someone actually knows what they're talking about and has a specific example to give, concrete world evidences, statistics, logic, you name it. Even just sounds clear and concise, and that's already a bit. I'm betting on that this time because I know that's important. But the other things, I'm maybe not as well. But their message that comes about with communication should already have had a focus. And unfortunately, even if you're again a philosopher like me who doesn't see it that way, I just expressed that idea without even needing to have an argument. See, that's what I just did. I just did that. I expressed the idea without even believing it. But that's the self-aware realization of that already. Is that I expressed the idea, I didn't agree with it, I didn't even want to promote it, but I did. And that's why I'm trying to get to you here. That's what I'm trying to get to. Is that's the most self-aware thing I said in the last 20 seconds, is that even though I am hard about the communication that I don't want to believe in, I still have to do something about it anyways. I still have to learn how to improve and play that human game alone. Communications was big on me, so that was already a big thing. But another thing about the human game, as far as home bases possible or not in communication that could exist other than an argument or a topic focus, is what would technically come down to any label I could use for explaining what it's like to have certain words be commonly used in a thread. You know, this is a weird phenomenon I'm going to explain real quick. You ever played Wizards? Okay. You ever played Magic the Gathering? And you have this one card, that's my brother showed me this, that has the most douchebaggery function ever. You can either flip it to make it invincible, immortal, in first touch and death strike. Death touch and death first strike. And if you flip it again for a hex, you can't even, it's hex proof, which you can use magic spells on it. So it's almost invulnerable to everything at almost any given time, but not entirely, right? So that's one of the most bullshit cards in the whole game. Easily. Even as old as that game is, for how old that card may be, or new even. But the idea is that between that, and I'll make another weird example, in the third Batman trilogy series from the Dark Knight, Arkham Gotham series, the live action ones, the one with the Bane villain, there are multiple characters, including Batman and Bruce Wayne himself, that go through these series of traumatic events that build them and shape them as a character over time, whether they survive or not. The one who resembles closely, his name in the movie, without much spoilers given to that particular detail alone, is he's basically one of the ages in the movie, one of the ones that grew out through the trilogy. And this Robin character, he basically hero superheroes his way through the movie. Basically, he does things that, well, for a little bit of plot here, he was a cop in the previous two movies, according to like the Dick Grayson character. Not maybe, I don't know which one is the one living still, not the half-faced one. Long story short, he's given a role throughout the movie, expanding on the idea of this suspension of belief, where he can do something in the movie even though he still has his own flaws, his own traumas, his own imperfections, things that he has to go through, that things that he cannot control, things that he can control, and the things that he does in spite of what he does or does not do, how he learns that. And he goes as far as to investigate the entire city of Gotham, finding out about things that he didn't have to know about, things that he didn't have to find out about, make possible, doing his best to save people's lives, and knowing the truth. And by the time he's finally compromised and about to get killed off in the movie, Batman saves him. And it's like, but until that point, he was already doing really well. Not just because he could do something, but because he made an example of who he was as a person. And that was probably one of the best things about that movie, in my opinion. I mean, Batman was already a good character for like the comic book reasons, maybe even anything else he does. But it's just, I will overthink this because it's true. It's like, I will overcomplicate this because it's true. It's like, those things matter to me. And I'm going to bring that back full circle into my next example, if not my last example, for the home base in communication. my second example will be that yes, there are not certain words that you can use, obviously and blatantly and deliberately. Trauma words for that, for me at least personally. They're not these certain words that you can use per se to generally explain that you're being on a potential home base for communication, if that makes sense at all. But what you can do is there's a sustainable structure that exists in the spirit and soul of your communication, and that is what people take for granted as an unwritten rule. It's something that they don't realize they're doing, but it's what they're supposed to be doing, at least according to the human game. They basically they fall through a simple structure that, like the argumentation example I gave before, they focus on this one, maybe this again topic thing. They focus on one thing that they can apply to over time. If the inferencing and subtext and input and comprehension and emphasis and elaboration is needed, unfortunately, no matter how many of us philosophers here, actually or not, want to believe that we can do the exact opposite and expand first and then go smaller later. I do that still to this day. Yep. But the idea is to start small and then expand from there as part of the human game. Unfortunately, for those of us who still expand first and then go small later, that makes me feel way better about my life. But unfortunately, I still have to improve something every once in a while. It doesn't have to be communication, but if it does involve communication, which it should at some point, unfortunately, I'm going to probably want to consider that start small then expand later thing. Because there's a thing I can get you in another video. You're more intense as a person than you realize. Not necessarily per se through quality over quantity, but you're more intense as a person than you're aware of yourself consciously. There are things that you do that are more passive than people who are supposedly long-term humans will give you credit for. They'll be like, no, if you don't do it, it's not apparent. No. What makes you think I will be okay with being concise? Why would I be okay with that if I didn't know that I was going to be somewhat trusting on the quality over quantity thing and make sure that I was okay with doing the things the small, simple way at first and expand later? Why would I be okay with that? It's because I know that there is more to my life than I understand. And that's a subconscious level that I don't have to feel bad about. My third and final example of the home base potential or not in communication as part of the human game for this podcast episode 4, is basically people are generally okay with their lives even if they're unfair. People are generally okay with the idea that if they need to ask somebody for something, if they need to be vocal about something, there are people who are simple in their own minds, they think they are, who still overcomplicate their own lives, right? There are people who have a simple life that still overthink things. There are people like me who can miraculously behold, I can make oversimplifications. I can make examples for things that aren't specific enough, if that's even a chaotic example, possible paradox, whatever. But, that's the beauty of life already. Is that beauty doesn't have to just be found in the complex things, but it's supposed to be implied that beauty is found in the simple things. But as if it was supposed to be the first thing that I understand that way with. So that's my third example, is that people are generally okay with not only the way that they choose to speak clearly, formally, they're okay with who they are as a person in spite of their native language of choice or condition naturally. They're okay with how they do their lives, make their living, their career, their love life, their friendships, their pets at home, their dogs. See, I'm going to make examples nowadays a little better, at least trying. But I'm not hard myself about be bad examples. I just say that sometimes, for some reason. But I don't mean to be negative about that. So they have like pets, like dogs or cats or horses in their farm. They have cows to tend to. They're not hard on themselves for needing to learn how to negotiate those things in spite of having a mouth that can open or close. However you want to use the ears to mouth thing, metaphor. I don't necessarily need to go with that myself, because I do actually tend to not talk as much as I want to, even though I also contrarily have seen obviously what was the consequence of talking too much, but at least I get to know what it's like to talk too much, and I regret that. But there's a lot more to the communication thing than even I know, so or human game for that matter. But people, and that example is weird because it doesn't mention communication and home bases. I just say things like, in this third example, people are okay with life. Well, what do you mean by that? That has nothing to do with your topic. You're talking about for the last 2 examples, and now this third example makes no sense. Like, as maybe the third example isn't any bit worse than the last 2. Not harm myself with that one though. But basically, it's non-specific, right? So it contrasts the first example a lot. The third one does. Because the first one's about an example being solid. Second one's about being fine-tuned with how you know that you're trying to improve. And then the third one's about even if you don't know what to improve or what to even do, you'll still be okay. And that's my lingo there. But to expand that one more time, from the simple part, if only thing with my promises there. Maybe if I didn't. The thing with I'd be shooting myself in the foot pretty damn bad if I said I didn't know anything about life or didn't know anything about life in general. I cannot be the one guy who's like, I'm ugly, or I'm not smart, or I'm not the kind of person who you should be listening to with this face. No, I'd be shooting myself in the foot really bad. Like, I'm not going to brag and be only narcissistic about anything, but I can still make an effort to emphasize what I am proud of in spite of not having to be anti-humble, you know? I can still humble myself and be lovable and all that. It doesn't have to only be about what do I do with what I have. As per this third example I'm getting to in a second. It doesn't have to be like that. I can certainly give you the advice I think is worthwhile, whether it's test of time or not. And then brag about being a whatever rating out of 10 I think I am, physically attractive, appearance-wise, physically speaking. Even the health from wealth and the beauty of anything internal or external. But this third example is weird, I know. It's like, why do you have to mention people are okay with their lives or not even okay with their lives if that has nothing to do with communication in the home base that I mentioned with the quote-unquote over and over? I honestly don't know myself, but that's the point I'm making like the last 2 minutes ago, is that I don't have to have that answer to tell you, to give you an inspiration or even a route to help you. There are things that I can even do that helps you that I think are hurting you on accidents. I'm not hurting you on purpose, but I might think I'm not helping you enough, and I'm helping you more than I realize. That goes to my first example of 3, where I said that you're more intense than you realize. Maybe that was probably the second example, actually. But for this third example, it's like, you're more intense than you realize as a person. It doesn't have to be about quality over quantity. It doesn't have to be about clear and concise. It just, you will pretty much give anybody your energy, spiritually even, if that has to be a thing. Doesn't have to be in this context, but like, your energy and your vibration pretty much reaches anyone else's without having to necessarily be about what you wanted it to be good, with honest intentions. Your honest intentions are so matter, not gonna lie. But don't worry about having to make sure that you have something going on for yourself that gives people what you thought they wanted or what you thought would help them. You're still going to help them anyways, not full stop. There is enough going on in anyone's life that they don't have to not deny on a simple or complex level. Whether they want to live ambitiously or simple, or would have more less black and white pictures that even I can make as a self-proclaimed complex person. But not even me harm myself about that. That's a different perspective than what I think of for myself. So those are my 3 examples of the Human Game Console Podcast episode 4 in terms of what home bases would simultaneously exist with communication. Thank you guys very much for watching. This could end off in 19 minutes very easily, unless I would do an end card for 1920. We're probably going to actually do that real quick, so take care, and I'll see you for the next episode, as well as reviews on this my wife else's channel. So, end card. I'm not going to probably be able to edit this on the computer yet, but did you guys know that there's 4 types of Amelia characters in fiction? The Amelia McBride character from Amelia Rules, exclamation mark. The Amelia character from Wallace the Brave comic strip. That was recent, actually. The Amelia character from Infinity Train, and the Amelia character, I don't know, it has 20 minutes, whatever. The Amelia character from, yours truly, Amelia from Hololive, the Amelia Watson character, the VTuber. Okay. Yeah, that might as well be my end card, but I didn't, yeah. Other than that, AMELIA, or Emmy, watching Emmy, EV VTuber, or I mean, whatever.